Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about hunter side jobs. How do hunters put gas in the car and food on the table and keep a roof over their heads? We'll talk about the legal and not so much. But first, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I started watching Supernatural in season 3. I became a fanfic writer in 2012, and I love talking about Supernatural.
And Lola.
My name's Lola Lariscy. I'm a writer, and I've been watching Supernatural since 2005, and I'm really not this red. It's a combination of the shirt and the lighting.
Okay. And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. I write, as Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my books are ones that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I fell in love with Supernatural halfway through season 11 and binge watched 11 seasons in time for season 12. And I really haven't stopped going down the rabbit hole since then. So let's talk about hunter side jobs. Of course, there's Bobby, Singer Salvage, which is a fantastic way to keep vehicles running, put a big iron perimeter around you with all of the steel that's in those cars, hide a few bodies, and that's just a perfect side job. But
and you work from home while he's answering FBI fake calls.
Doesn't get a whole lot of foot traffic, so he doesn't have to worry about being interrupted too often. Lots of land to spread out. So that one's just kind of a terrific hunter side job. But what are some of the other ones? How did the other? Of course, Sam and Dean, scammed credit cards and hustled a lot of pool to put gas in that Impala. But that's not everybody's gig. Carole, what about you?
Probably the next most prominent jobs we see are Jody and Donna, who are actual sheriffs and law enforcement officials. Again, it's such a great tie-in because they can now scan for odd cases coming in and tag things that are out of the norm and flag a hunter that something's going on. I also have some access to resources that would be harder for regular hunters. It's much easier for them to get into the forensics of things and call up reports, and they don't have to hack into stuff. They can just say, I want the stuff. So that's a really nice, I guess it's not really a side gig because it's really their main gig. However, it ties in really well for them to be able to function with the hunter network in that kind of position.
Okay.
And their uniform is real. They didn't have to.
The uniform is real.
Yeah, I love what you said about they can access an awful lot of non-public information without having to hack or break in or, scam their way into it, which certainly makes it a little easier and a little less likely that they're going to get caught. Plus, they bring a knowledge of procedure to an investigation, maybe an ongoing relationship with the coroner. All of those things would certainly make it a little easier because the boys kind of pants this quite a bit. They had a lot of on-the-job training, but they really wing it in more than just their FBI aliases. Lola, how about you?
Well, we've got the Harvilles, Joe and Eileen. Eileen owned the Roadhouse, and her daughter worked as a waitress. Huh?
Ellen, not Eileen.
Sorry, Ellen. The reason I said Eileen was because I was going down the list, and the last one I looked at was Eileen. That's where I got Eileen from. And I spent hours in front of the Supernatural wiki. So maybe that's why I'm so red, because I'm out of breath from being in front of the Supernatural Wiki and copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Anyways, so they Eileen and her husband own the Roadhouse diner, whatever bar. And that was excellent because it gave them money, but it was also a place for hunters to meet up and they got to network. So it worked out very well.
I'm really surprised that we didn't run into more regional roadhouses over the course of the series, because everybody couldn't have driven to Nebraska or wherever, Harvell's was. And it was such a perfect idea, whether it was a diner, like in the movie Gunpowder Milkshake, that was or a library, or some place that was a hunter gathering spot for information. It just seems like there should have been more of them. And maybe Sam and Dean avoided them because, everybody at some point was out to get the Winchesters, but it just seems like it made sense for them to be hunter-friendly bars. So, yeah.
I kind of feel like once because Kripke himself he invented the Roadhouse, and then he decided he didn't want a real fixed position for them to be working out of. So I feel like maybe just when they then steered away from it, none of the writers ever thought to come back to that as an idea, because you could still certainly have it as transient. Like the Roadhouse, I understand he didn't want them to have a base, but it wouldn't hurt to have almost like Monster of the Week. You could still have a meeting spot every so often just for them to stop at, like you said, it would have made sense. And I'm sure there have to be hunters out there who were injured. Wasn't there one shop that they stopped at one time, and it was a blonde lady, and she used to be a hunter, but her leg had been injured, and so instead she had opened up a shop that catered, that hunters could kind of go to. I can't think of the episode.
Did she get killed by Abaddon?
Yes. And that with that kind of thing, where you have hunters who maybe can no longer hunt, but yet possess so much valuable knowledge, like Bobby, and could have set up shop in places to then have hunters be able to come to them and say, so I need a little, mandrake root or something like that.
Well, the Men of Letters had their chapter houses. I think it would have been totally appropriate for the hunters to have their bars.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Just kind of have it in each state so that it's drivable, within the state. And there's this, of course, they're going to be set up in pentagrams and a big circle. But and then you're right, Carol, they could have just shown up once at the one in,
Yeah, I really think it was just that, once they moved away from that in season 3, they just never went back to it. And especially then as later years, and we were so enmeshed and everything was angels and demons and angels and demons. And we were, Monsters of the Week really were more of a side thing than the main thing. And so any kind of thoughts, I think, along those lines were long gone.
Mm-hmm.
But much as I would have enjoyed more of an emphasis on Monster of the Week than Angels and Demons, then it would have been so nice to work something like that in,
Yeah.
Because it seems crazy that there wouldn't be. It just doesn't make sense with the way that they networked and everything, that they wouldn't have places like that.
Well, and you also provisioning places, like you said, with the character that got killed by Abaddon. And I'm also thinking of the episode in season 15 where it actually turned out to be Adam and Serafina.
Right. And they had to get the rib. They had to get part of his rib.
And it was somewhere between a new age shop and a head shop.
Mm-hmm.
Get your bong and your ceremonial crystals all at the same time, and maybe some mushrooms in the back.
But when you need that extra vision.
There was a shop like that in my hometown in the 70s, and it closed under mysterious reasons, but that store really reminded me of it.
Mysterious reasons.
Yes, mysterious reasons. But I could see, having the funky decor shop in town that has the Muggle stuff in the front and the back room for the hunters, or the hardware store that has the extra room with the really good hardware.
Right. The cups with the runes on them and stuff.
Yeah, the gun shop that has the special ammunition behind the counter.
You have to go through maybe a door, you know, and you have to know the password to say something like that.
You have to be able to pass through the. You have to be able to walk through the rune, the wording, and if you're not human, it won't let you through.
Yeah, that would have been an awesome. And of course, there'll also be gambling there, and you know, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it just makes sense that those things would exist, but I guess it was never important to the plot, or no one ever thought to write them in. But I think they would have been lovely additions to just the world building.
Rather than another scene of Sam being hit against the door, or Dean scowling, or them getting in a fight, you know.
Or the playground.
Oh yeah, the playground. Yeah, it's like, oh, they're at the playground again.
And
or,
I think,
you know, Castiel scowling and not understanding something that a human says.
I think that is one of the things that is easier to do maybe in books than in TV, because people are, you know, the writers are so pressed for time in TV, and you have a little more room to spread your elbows and explore the world a little more in print, but still it would be nice to have. What are some other side jobs that we saw in the series?
I think another good tie-in one was we saw Missouri and Pamela. Not only were they psychics that the hunters consulted, but they actually worked as mediums and psychics. Missouri had clients come in, and when we first meet her, she has just told this guy, you know, that everything's going to be wonderful at home, and as soon as he leaves, she's like, that poor guy, his wife is sleeping with half the town or something, you know. So she really was working, and Pamela as well, that they were making their living as psychics and mediums. So of course that didn't even need any work to match right there.
They were kind of born into it.
Well, and we saw some of that with the psychics in Lilydale, the ones that were genuine, and some of the others that they happened upon along the way. That go ahead.
There's the one when they had to put Charlie back together, and they had to contact the man who used to be like this tremendously famous boy psychic, because he had like he knew how to either get into Oz or like get them back together, and he had valuable information, but he had been a famed psychic as a boy, and he had since retired. But yeah, they were everywhere. And you've got well, I guess the Vanes were not psychics, they were just witches, but there certainly were other psychics around that they would we either heard referred to, or that they would consult, you know, on a monster of the week kind of basis.
Lola, who else are you thinking of?
Hackers. For jobs, hackers. Not only, of course, Charlie, but I was going back in time and reading the Supernatural Wiki, and they reminded me of Ash. Do you remember Ash? He worked at the roadside, and he apparently went to MIT, and he hacked heaven. Who'd have thunk it was a thing, but it was a thing. 'Twas a thing, and he did that. 'Twas a thing.
Well, and I mean, Sam really qualifies as a hacker with everything he breaks into. And then Frank Devereaux.
Yep.
Which I read in the wiki that Frank Devereaux, Charlie Bradbury came about because the actor who played Frank Devereaux wasn't around. He wasn't available, so they made Charlie Bradbury.
Well, we love
it.
That's what the Supernatural Wiki says. Therefore, it must be true.
All hail the Supernatural Wiki.
All hail. They did a lot of work for that. I just spent 2 hours reading it.
Well, but you know, we lucked out on that because we got Charlie. But yeah, I think having somebody who can hack into systems and get that information if you don't happen to really be an FBI agent would definitely be useful. As we've often said, just such a shame that Victor Henriksen died right after he saw the truth of the supernatural existing, because it would have been great to have had a man on the inside. Carole, what else?
I think as far as like kind of categories, I think those are really the biggest kind of categories or categorizations that a lot of it is then kind of like there's somebody here, there's somebody there. I think Ian is the one who was Adam, who had that herbal shop kind of thing. And then same along with then the anonymous blonde woman that Amazon killed. And I really liked her. She was really forthright and really cool. And I really liked her. I remember that. But that would certainly be, you know, an easy one. Probably Caleb, Caleb always, we never really saw him, but he was still a pretty, in the very beginning, we heard about him all the time. They were constantly referring to him in terms of, you know, time he spent with the boys, time he spent hunting with John. And he seemed to be the one they used to go to for like weapons and ammo and everything. So I'm kind of wondering, was he in fact a gun dealer or, you know, weapons dealer, had a gun shop or something of some kind, that he had all this access to weapons and could then funnel, you know, what the hunters needed to them. They were never, that was always a little bit vague, but it's what would make sense to me if he was, kind of arming hunters as they needed. And I also then wondered about Elkins, who created the cult. Was he also like involved in guns and either gunsmithing or something along those lines to be able to say, ooh, I invented this gun specifically to murder demons. So I wonder about those two, how solid that basis would be for them, that they were gunsmiths or ran gun shops. And certainly there's yet another venue of a place that could be helpful in the national network of hunters across America. HAA, Hunters Across America.
I like it. No, HAAM. You put the am in there, so it's ham.
There you go.
It's ham.
Well, and then you've got Pastor Jim. I have no idea if he really was a pastor or of what.
No, I think he really was. They referred to his church and everything. Yeah.
So
in fact, he was killed in his church. When Meg killed him, he was in his church. So he was a legitimate pastor, but then also knew about the evil side of things.
It would make sense that they would have contacts in the clergy. Sam can't do all the exorcisms. I mean, he could have probably funded a lot of their gas money if he'd have just had a Hunter app that was the, pick your exorcism, and then they could just call it up on their phone and have it read it out. Vistatrick. But surely there were other priests and ministers and clergy of other religions who got involved with settling the restless dead or getting rid of demons or warding off things, or just being the chaplain to hunters. In the motorcycle world, there are people who are chaplains to motorcycle riders, and they're around if you need to talk to somebody. Hunters certainly needed to talk to somebody. And so I could see if you had somebody from the life who they really could talk about what actually happened, that again, for somebody who maybe couldn't go out and kick ass anymore, but understood, that could be a tremendous addition to the world.
Now, of course, my brain goes to, it's going to get awkward, because at some point the people are going to be like, yeah, Pastor, angels are dicks. And yeah, the big bad is God. That's going to get awkward. Like,
I don't know. I have over the years made friends with a lot of clergy who have expressed those things, not exactly in those words, but pretty darn close. So I'm not sure.
I'm gonna be like, yeah, we kind of figured that one out. We just don't really talk about it much. But yeah.
We don't say that from the pulpit, but yeah. Yeah.
It's an open secret.
Now, we did see a couple of people like Dr. Roberts and some others who were physicians, or at least had been physicians, or kind of were physicians, had been physicians before they lost their license or whatever. And the hunter community, again, needed people like that. We never really learned enough about them to find out if they also hunted, or if they just were willing to do whatever for money, or if they were in on the hunting experience, but this was the way they contributed.
Allies.
Huh?
Allies. Maybe they were allies.
Mhm.
But we need if we were really going to do this right, there needs to be a whole network of hunter allies, not just the hunters
Mhm.
doing side jobs, but they have to have some of this. Going back to the minister thing, it did make me think of the shapeshifter who was the therapist, who gets the boys on the couch and gets the whole therapy session. She wasn't a hunter, but she was knowledgeable of hunters. And she was definitely using her abilities as a therapist. So again, pretty interesting thing there.
Well, and you had a nurse, wasn't Alex Jones, one of the young female hunters? She was a nurse.
Yeah.
And of course,
Go ahead.
And we have Garth, who I have a dear spot in my heart for. I love him, Dennis. And according to the Supernatural Wiki, I didn't realize this. He had actually gone to college for dentistry before he became a hunter. I thought he did that afterwards, just, I didn't, so he was already a dentist, which means this whole time we should have been saying Dr. Garth.
Right, well, it's when he ganked the tooth. It was when he ganked the tooth fairy that, he really got into hunting.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That makes so much sense.
That's why
Go ahead.
I'm just reflecting on the Hanna-Barbera Christmas story where Garth became the elf who wanted to be the dentist because Garth was a dentist.
Well, and we talked about Bobby's salvage yard, but John had been a mechanic, and in countless fanfics, every time the boys are stuck somewhere because somebody's recuperating, Dean goes and gets a job as a mechanic, which isn't that far-fetched given how many times he rebuilt the Impala.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother, and I even wrote fanfic because there's a whole subcategory now of all the different jobs that we see the boys take. So in canon, we've seen the boys hustle pool, of course, poker, credit card fraud, that those are probably their three largest revenue streams, we'll say. But certainly we have to assume they picked up little odd jobs here and there. I mean, when we saw Sam being a barback, he was trying to leave hunting, but nonetheless, he had no skills to, get in there and do that. So I'm sure they still picked up, but in fanfic, that's a given, that they would pick up little jobs here and there. They'd stay a week here and wash dishes. They would stay 3 weeks there because maybe one of them is recuperating. So the other one goes and gets a job and makes some money for them before they go on to the next hunt. And it would be, Dean would be a mechanic. Dean would be a short order cook.
Sorry.
I don't know. Dean would be a short order cook. He would do construction. He would be a ditch digger. I mean, he would do all of that kind of thing. Sam's, it was always either, he could also work he would never be the short order cook, but he would like to be a dishwasher. He would, of course, work in a library. He would pick up maybe some substitute teaching in school. What else does Sam do?
Well, he
along those lines.
Well, in canon, he fixed air conditioners and sinks at the motel in season 8. So he was handy enough with knowing how to do that, even though Dean was the mechanic, that he could do that. You're right about the barback.
Yeah, they would certainly, you know, they could paint how there are a lot of whatever kind of unskilled labor, you know, they could paint houses. Yeah, they could, you know, do landscaping and like mow yards. There's always fan fiction is rife with all of these kinds of things where they either have taken a break from hunting, or like I said, one's recuperating, or they're just like, wow, we got to stop for a month and like make some money because we're like so flat broke. You know, I'm tired of sleeping in the car for a week and, you know, eating day old burgers or whatever. So
Dumpster
yeah,
diving.
and some of them are really creative. Like I said, these are kind of the ordinary ones, but there's some where like they've gotten really creative about, you know, oh wow, I never thought of that, you know, about some skill that they parlayed into a job somewhere where you're like, oh, that was really interesting.
Mhm.
So
Well, you could certainly see Sam doing something with museums and, you know, living history or something like that. Dean and Sam both had not only good pool skills, but poker skills. And so, you know, they certainly could have hustled poker as well as pool. But for some reason, so much fan fiction has Dean as a baker in an alternative universe. I don't know why, but Dean as a baker.
he's a, well, especially not so much when they're still roaming, but once he's in the bunker and he really starts cooking, and it turns out he's a good cook. Well, he's making these like wonderful burgers that even Sam loves. And so a lot of it kind of goes into that development. Then it turns out he's a really good cook. And then some of that then just goes into the baking. Certainly a lot of curtain fix go into that, where he becomes, you know, maybe he starts working in a diner and then he owns the diner, or and the baking and stuff, because he loves food and he's very precise. And so baking and cooking, but it's pretty, you know, Dean as a dessert chef.
Okay, how about alternate worlds? Because we know in one alternate world, they were actors. They were themselves, Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles. And then in the other alternate, they were like GQ models with the scarf and everything. So when they
were still hunters, but they were paid hunters.
very erudite, and they had like the scarves and everything. So I wonder, like when they were that Dean and Sam, what do you think they did besides being paid hunters? You think they were models? Probably models.
You never know. I mean, that's just a whole different end of fan fiction that maybe we won't discuss today. But
we got Tom. I'm spitballing. I'm in it.
You know, one of the other things Sam often does in curtain fic is becomes a paralegal. He wouldn't be able, that keeps him from having to go back to law school, having to get through all those background checks. But becoming a paralegal is certainly something that he could do and would have a gift to it. There's also one where he becomes a tutor and gets paid tutor. And then
Sam has so much open to him. Sam could do so much because he's got college. I mean, he's got almost all of his bachelor's degree under his belt, right? When he leaves. So he's really set up to do a lot. Dean, you know, I love Dean, but he's pretty much set up to be a Chippendale dancer.
Again with the Chippendale.
Yeah, that's pretty much his end of the road.
But I think you're right. Picking up, you know, there's certainly ways to pick up day labor in the real world where it's just hired on for the day or a couple of days. You know, maybe in some alternate universe, they're the ones standing there at tax season in the Statue of Liberty outfit, spinning the arrow around.
Certainly in construction, I think that's not an uncommon paradigm, you know, for construction and road work and things like that. And actually, of course, you know, I totally forgot about the fact that when Dean was with Lisa, he worked a construction job that whole time.
I forgot about that.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, and he just went right into there because he already had the skills.
And the muscles.
Yeah. Pizza delivery. That one delivery driver who is not going to get robbed.
Uber Eats. Dean would have to just deliver food. He could not deliver people. He would not be a good Uber driver for people. He would cuss people out and he would have a 1 rating and he'd get like disbarred.
I don't think he'd want people in the Impala.
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
They'd have to steal a car to do deliveries or Uber.
I'm pretty sure those apps wouldn't accept the 67 Impala anyways. They have like
But what if he went and like joined a limo service? Because a lot of limo services like to have vintage cars. So people who don't want to stretch, but they can have like, you know, now I don't know old cars, but you know what I'm saying, like a Model T or, you know, an Edsel or something. And they could go in the fancy, you know, the fancy antique. He could do that.
Yeah.
Well, and certainly, especially with Dean's looks, being a chauffeur for a car service, because they tend to like people who fit a certain mold in a uniform. You know, they need to clean up nicely. Not that Sam doesn't, but Jensen's got the look. Dean's got the look.
Sam always has his hair kind of longish, and that might not fit into the GQ mold that the chauffeur company might want.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, Dean, he's going to get busy with people in the back seat. You know he's going to. You know he's going to.
Now, there was also an episode, well, we saw the boys in the one with the spa, the day spa, where Donna and the donuts and all that.
See, and Dean was working with the food. He was food prep.
That's
but
right.
Sam was the yoga instructor.
Okay.
And then we've also seen Sam in one of them. Now he was in disguise, not actually being paid to do the work, but we've also seen him be a janitor.
And Dean was the gym coach.
And hired security. They've shown up. Now, again, not a real job, but they certainly would have the know-how.
And there's a lot of that where they're kind of fitting into these kind of, menial sounds kind of like disparaging, and I don't mean it that way, but more jobs that are easier for people to just be able to walk into. I mean, you can't walk into just being a teacher because you have to have credentials and licenses and things, but you can walk into being a janitor because they're just like, oh, you're going to show up. And, you know, like with going to Eileen, for instance, when they met her, she was working as a maid in the retirement home. She was hunting the banshee, but that's what she stepped into, being a maid. So they do a lot of that where they're like you said, they pick up this, you know, janitor job or this coaching job or, you know, this, that, the other job, so that they blend into where they need to be and be able to observe what's happening so they can figure out who's doing what to who and how do they stop it. So that's a real benefit for them, very chameleon-like for them.
Well, one of the benefits of dropping into those jobs is that, unfortunately, the people that they are serving tend to completely ignore that they exist, and they're invisible. And so, even in real spy novels and real detective, you know, stories, those folks in those, you know, the waiter at the restaurant, the bartender, you know, they hear things because people forget they're there and just talk in front of them, the help, and and don't even realize they've done it because they don't see them. And that's about as close to being invisible as you can be, which, aside from, you know, all the disrespect and other things go with that in real life, if you're using it, that's an asset.
You can hear all kinds of things. Yep.
It's the way to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, like, the people who have inhabited those jobs, God, they must know so much. I just want to talk to them.
Oh, I thought of somebody else in the Elliot Ness one. The woman who was the tailor. Yeah. So she obviously knew about the work they were doing, but
and she worked with Elliot Ness. Like, he was the one out there, but she was the one you know, helping get things ready and giving him
Like, this is
information
my-
and stuff.
I don't remember her at all.
She
It's been a
was
while since I've
she
seen
was
that.
an interesting person. She was very forthright and got Dean all duded up, and then she planted one right on him.
Ooh, I like that.
She
She had a
she was
perk.
she was a mature woman
Yes.
who spoke her mind, and for someone who didn't have a big part, she was very memorable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of memorable, one of the more memorable jobs we saw a hunter have was, there was one who was a taxidermist.
Oh, I don't remember that. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh man. I'd have to look up what episode he was in. I want to say, is that the one where they had the rat dressed as Joffrey from Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Oh,
I just
goodness.
love, there's a still of like Sam, and he's in his fed suit and he's holding it and he's like, it's hilarious.
Well, and we also saw some people who were antique dealers who
Mhm.
had that safe that was a curse box, and they just hadn't bothered to tell their kid about it before they died. But that was obviously somebody who knew something about the supernatural, if not hunters, because they knew enough to put the bad stuff in a lead-lined safe. And that would also make sense for somebody to run an antique shop, run a storage, a whole network of storage buildings where, you know, nobody minds if you've got funny symbols painted on the walls.
Bobby could have branched out. He could have started a chain of you know, self-store units. Uncle Bob's.
Oh, that was awesome.
Uncle Bob's Save and Store or something like
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
that. Oh dear.
And then he could, if he wanted to hide the symbols, he could just have like patterns all over it, and you could see the sigils like in the patterns.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But those kinds of things, again, would make sense for a grassroots bootstrap
Mhm.
hunter network of, well, what do you guys need? All right, I can't hit the broadside of a barn with a shotgun, but I can run a storage unit.
Mhm.
I can't fight anyone. I'm more likely to hurt myself if I touch a gun. But you know what? I'm gonna run this for you. I'll be the proprietor of this, and I'll be in the back if you need me. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I could see that. You know, I could also see kind of like the mafia has their consigliaries. I could see having some lawyers on retainer who, you know, maybe a hunter saved their bacon or a hunter saved their kid or something, where
And things
it's
like that. Yeah. Things like that do pop up in fanfic too. You have the lawyer allies where they're just kind of like few and far between, but you know, they actually get called up. A hunter gets called up on a murder charge or something because of course something died. They just don't understand it wasn't really a person.
It used to be
You know,
human.
but
It's
tries-
still a weirdo.
tries to get them out, and because it really was like hand in love with the doctors too. You were mentioning the doctors earlier, and there's been many a story I've seen where, you know, one of them is critically injured and they will go to the hospital when it's really bad, but of course then they have to get out of there before they're found out that their insurance is all phony. But then there'll be doctors that they can go to who can stitch them up or, you know, set a bone and things like that, where they have a connection. You know, they knew somebody who knew somebody, or, you know, had that brush with evil themselves, and wasn't ready to go out and just become a hunter, but is happy to offer comfort and assistance to hunters because they know what a struggle it is and how dangerous the work is.
You know, another very valuable service would be crime scene cleaners, because you can't just burn the house down every time. So
especially not if it's a concrete warehouse or something.
Yeah, so if it's a building that you can't just burn down or blow up, what about not only getting rid of the you know, usual goop and gore, but the ectoplasm and the, you know,
The shifter skin.
the shifter skin, or the burnt angel wings on the walls. You know,
Yeah, what do they do? I love that visual. I just saw an episode where an angel got tanked, and I mean, I love the wings because you never see them with the wings, which is fine by me. But you have that charcoaled wing on the the ground behind them and stuff. But yeah, what they do?
That was the episode.
I've been scrubbing this, but it's not coming out.
That was the episode on the boat with the rift, where Jack kind of smashed all the angels away, and all the wings were like a pattern on the wall, sort of like smashed fairies. Yeah. But a crime scene cleaner, that could really come in handy. Or somebody entrepreneurial comes up with a network of hunter crime scene cleaners.
We need a Wetworks team out in Indianapolis.
Yeah. Any other ideas, either real or imagined? Anything else from fanfic or a corner of canon?
There's always something in fanfic that you'll come across that you haven't read before. Probably we were talking about Dean as the chef, the cook, the baker, but there was one story where Dean had left hunting, and because he had so much knowledge of urban lore and supernatural lore, he became a professor of mythology. And I really liked that because it's easy to shortchange Dean on being smart because Sam has the training from college and all of this, but Dean is so intelligent. He's busy beers, babes, and burps, but he's really, really smart. He comes up with all of these ingenious things. And so he became a professor of mythology, and I really like that. That's really taking something and extrapolating it fairly far, but not in an unbelievable way, because he did have all that knowledge. So
I can see the Indiana Jones with the girls in the front row writing on their eyelids.
Mm-hmm. And the hat, the fedora and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's called out of the classroom for an important mission.
So there
was a fanfic that I read where Sam went back in time to save Dean, and he did save him, but then he got trapped back in time, and he wasn't going to come back, so he had to make a life where he was, and I think he ended up as a professor. And it was a bittersweet story, but it was one where, all right, I'm stuck, I'm not even in my own time. What do I know, and how can I parlay that? And I think it was another one where he became a professor.
I feel a little robbed right now because
we didn't get any Chippendales.
Well, that too, but now, oh my God, I moved on. Listen to this. Listen. Dean, age say like 55. He's tenured. He's been a professor for like 20 years or something. He's got like gray sideburns and little salt and pepper hair. And he's so much more mature, I mean, although he still goes after college age girls, because in this scenario, I'm a college age girl. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's already working out in my head. I'm a college age girl. And he's my professor with salt and pepper hair. And he keeps looking at me. And I'm like, but it's so wrong. And he's like,
all right. Save it for AO3, Lola. Save it for AO3.
Excuse me. I'm okay. But we need that. We need that.
Well, as I said, we're keeping it G and PG rated here. There are a whole other, Winchester professions that if you're really interested,
yes, there are.
The 3. Oh, well, speaking of which, to land it on that salty note, we have blown through our time. So thank you. This has been fun. We've thought about a lot of things that hunters could do. So if there are any unemployed hunters out there thinking about coming up with a new career, we've given you plenty of ideas. But before we wrap up, let's let you tell everybody where they can find you online, starting with you, Lola.
Well, I would tell you I have a website, but last time I looked, there's an oops message, so I need to look into that. I just forget. But other than that, I'm all over the internet, Lola Lariscy. And as you all know, if you search my name, you're either going to find me or a bunch of dead old ladies, and I'm related to all of them.
Okay. And Carole.
I'm not related to any dead old ladies that you can find on the internet. However, you can find me on Facebook, especially in the TFWNC group that Gail runs, and of course on continual panels. I'm on Twitter as true_firesign10, and all of my fic is on AO3 under firesign10.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. I write columns for the Winchester Family Business. But most of the time, you can find me here on Continual. All the rest of the social media are some variation of those names. So thank you very, very much for being here. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.